In today's video, I'll be showing you guys my process of creating Assetto Corsa tracks with Blender. I'll be going over the entire process, so from creating the track itself to then also exporting it into the game. We'll be using two tools for this project. One of them is an asset pack made by Thomas called Track Tools. It's a huge collection of procedural tools that simply make your life easier when it comes to making roads and all sorts of race circuits. And then for the exporting part, we actually won't be using ksEditor, but rather we will be using my Blender add-on that simply allows you to export to Assetto Corsa directly from within Blender. So without further ado, grab yourself a cup of coffee and enjoy the video. The track that we'll be making today is a local karting track. I figured this is a good example to showcase this method on, as it's a pretty flat track and also fairly simple to make, while still having a couple of features that are pretty unique. So the first thing I always do is I either get a drone image of the track that I'll be making or just a Google Maps screenshot. So for this instance, I just went here, took a screenshot of this, and then also measured the distance from the left side of the track to the right side of the track. Down at the bottom, you can see the rough distance over here. I did the same for the width of the track over here, and I also measured the road width here on the main straight. Then I bring that screenshot into Blender and I make sure the dimensions match up. I do this in a bit of a probably stupid way, but what I do is I take a cube and then just fit it to the measurements of my track. And if the image lines up with the measurements like this, then I know that this is accurate. Of course, this is not perfect, but for this video, this will do. So we can now begin working on our track. In this video, I also won't be explaining how to install either of the tools. That is very well documented both in the asset pack of Thomas and in my Blender add-on, and both are also very simple to install. So it should only take you about a minute. With that said, let's begin. The first thing I will do is I will place the 3D cursor on the main straight, and I will begin by importing a road asset. Then we'll flip it by 90 degrees, position it roughly in the middle of our track, and then define the road width of this. So I'll go into the modifier section, and down on the road width, we measured at 9 meters. Then all you have to do is you go into edit mode of this object, grab one of the points of your road, and simply begin placing it around. So I'll put this roughly around here, and then you press E to extrude it, and then Shift Z to constrain it to the ground axis, so you can simply paint the road in. One thing I like to do is I imagine a middle line here on the road, and also I split turns like these into sections. So I know that this is the middle of the turn, and then I know that I can have a couple of points like this, and the curve will follow along. So if I now just select this point, extrude, I simply trace roughly the middle of the track while placing my points. You can be very rough with the first placement, as you can always select a point later, press G to move it, Shift Z to adjust it, and simply place it so that the road will actually follow your image. Over here, we can see that the road shrinks a little bit. So if we press Alt S, you can see that we can scale the end here. So we'll begin by shrinking this road down so that it matches our screenshot here. And for turns, I have one tip that I can give you. After a straight, make sure you add a point before the turn and not here, because if I were to just go and try and do this, you can see that the turn will not look good. So what I like to do is I bring a point right before the turn, and then I add another one, and then simply follow the rest of the turn. Find this method to be a lot easier to trace turns, especially when they get a little more complex or twisty like these. It's all about controlling the amount of points you will add to your track. And now to connect the last part of the track over here, I simply select the first and last point and press F to fill in the gap. Now you can go and fine tune your track if you want to really line everything exactly with the image. But for this tutorial, I'll leave it at this stage, as this is good enough. So with that, we now have the outline of our track, which we'll be using to build everything on top of. The next thing that we can add are, of course, the racing curbs. So I will position my 3D cursor next to the racing curb, and over in the asset pack, I will find the racing curb over here, go into edit mode, and let's delete 2 of the vertices so that we're left with this straight part. Now, before you go and trace everything manually yourself, you should go down into the modifier section. So these are these weird looking images over down here, and you should be looking for the snap to and sub D curve modifiers. So I want you to take the snap to and drop it on there, and also the sub D curve. Then over on the modifier stack, make sure that the order is sub D curve, snap to, and then racing curb. On the sub-D curve, we'll increase the subdivision to 3. And then also on the snap to, we need to set it to mode object. Our target needs to be the road. We need to snap to the road's edges from a distance of about 5 meters away. You'll see that now when I bring this object closer to the road, it will start snapping to the edge of it. We can then go into edit mode and simply roughly outline where the curbs are. Press Alt-S to extrude them out like so, and we are now adding racing curbs. Then the process repeats, so all you do is you take these 2 points, duplicate them over around the track, and simply trace your curbs. For the opposite side, all you do is you take 2 points again, duplicate them over, and rotate them 180 degrees, so that they go to the other side of the track, and then you simply trace along. If you want to scale the ends of your curbs, you can also do that by selecting the last point, pressing Alt-S and scaling it down. So this way you'll get this nice fall-off look to your curbs. For this track, I won't be doing that. You can also do that in the racing curb modifier itself by configuring the scale ends value here, and then you can define the end length, and this will scale both sides equally. For this, we'll keep it off and just continue tracing our curbs. And just like that, we have added racing curbs to our track. So now the next part that I like to do are the fences and barriers of this track. So I'll go over up here and I'll add this jersey barrier over here along the main straight. So I'll simply position the 3D cursor, select the jersey barrier and import the asset again. Then go into edit mode, just select a few points like so, and we'll begin by placing this around the track. Now this track has a fence around it, but I'll actually add these jersey barriers around it since it's easier to do that. So I'll just go ahead and trace everything with this. There we go. We have now added a barrier around our track as well. So the next thing we can do is add in the trees, and then we'll get a first export of this out. To add the trees, we'll simply search here for a preset. I'm just going to use this default one. Position my 3D cursor and import the asset over here. I'll move this off track just to show you guys how it all works. So the first thing you want to do is you want to go into the terrain and mask section of this object, and you want to define the terrain here to be our screenshot in this case. And then the mask is actually our road. So we don't want any trees on our road, and we want the terrain to have the trees. Then all we simply do is we go into edit mode of this plane and we push it onto the track. And you will see that it is actually just putting the trees everywhere except the track. So now I like to go into top-down view and simply scale this to match the track like this. And you'll see that now our track has a lot of trees. This is too many trees. It's also not really realistic to how it is on the actual track, but for the purposes of this video, this will do. The only thing we will do is we will remove the trees in the middle of the track, which we can do by going into the distribution section over here and then increase the mask minimum distance. Doing so basically gives us a fully procedural tree placement where it will get placed everywhere around the track but nowhere close to the track. So with that, we have a very basic setup that we can use for our track. We can add pit stops and this would already be a drivable track. Then the rest is obviously just adding in the elements that make this feel like the real place. So creating a parking lot here instead of all the trees, adding the pit boxes, adding the pit lane and so on. But for this demo, we'll leave it at this. So we'll actually begin exporting here. So inside the Assetto Corsa directory, inside content tracks, I've made a tutorial folder. This is where we'll be creating our track in. So I'll simply take the file path to this folder and put it inside of the add-on. This allows us to then just fill in the track information. So I'll call this tutorial track. We'll leave the description, country and city all blank and just save this track data for now. The next part is adding our pit boxes and start positions. Now on the actual track, they're over here on the main straight. The pit boxes are of course in here, but we'll be adding everything to the main road over here just to test that it all exports okay. So adding in our pit box first. Can position it a little bit higher and rotate it so it's facing forward. And then on the same position, I will just put the starting position as well. So effectively, this is where our car will spawn. Then while we're at it, we can add a time gate and simply place these to serve as our start and finish line. So we'll just position them like so, and we're good to go. Our car can now spawn and it can do a full lap. Next up, we need to go into the race and objects panel and simply select our road. Define it as a road. I'll actually take the screenshot of this and just define it as a grass surface. So it will look exactly the way it does, but all of the surface area will feel like grass when you drive on it with the car. We can then later replace the texture, but for now, let's just leave it as it is. The next part we need to select are the curbs and give that the surface assignment as well. And then we can simply save the surfaces. Going over to the extra panel now, these are just some of the things that we can tweak to make this track look a little bit better right out the gate. So we'll add grass effects to spawn on the screenshot material. We'll increase the size a little bit so it's more apparent. We'll prepare everything for rain effects, so I'll just auto detect everything. And then we don't have any water effects or anything like that. So the only thing left to do is the tree effects. These trees are obviously still procedural, so we first need to realize these. We can do so by selecting the tree object over here, pressing F3 and type make instance real. You can also find this menu in the Object Apply menu over here on the top left. Once you click it, you will see all of your trees turn into orange trees like so, and they're still selected. So what you want to do next is you simply press M to add them to a collection, name your collection something like trees, and then simply collapse it. I'll go ahead and disable the collection for now, just so I can select the actual tree object over here and get rid of that since we won't be needing this anymore. You can of course keep it, just disable it or put it away in a collection, but for our case we could just delete it. So now we made all trees instances, so each tree is an individual asset, but we still need to prepare them for export. So I'll go ahead and select everything inside this collection by right clicking on it and clicking select objects. This selects our trees again and set it up as a tree. I'll just leave it on group prefix A and press OK. You'll see down here, we set up 837 trees. We won't be adding any lights at this stage or any cameras and so on, so we can just save the config over here. The next two parts are very easy to do. All you have to do is go into the material editor, click auto setup materials, then go into the export section, scan everything for issues. It will say pitbox count mismatch since we added these pitboxes. So we'll simply click fix. And now we're ready to export. Now, if your track is simple like so, I recommend just exporting all of this as one piece. If your track is much more complex, you can of course export selected only. I'll show you this in a little bit, but first let's get just the normal export out. Make sure that things that you don't want to export are fully disabled. So for example, here this tree asset library, we want to just keep it like so. So these are the only things that we will be exporting. The beautiful part about this plugin is that you can leave things procedural. So I can leave this road as it is and then make adjustments later on and just simply export it again. You don't have to convert everything to mesh and then export it individually. So we'll go ahead and export, smart export. Make sure that the file name of the KN5 remains unchanged. It needs to match the name of the folder that it's in. So in this case, the name of the folder is tutorial. So the name needs to also be tutorial.kn5. We'll go ahead and export this. And then loading into Content Manager, you can find your track and simply press go. And just like that, we have our first export of our karting track. So everything looks correct in game now. It all reacts to the light. Let's also test the weather effect. So if we make it nice and rainy, we should get a rain effect and also puddles forming on the edges of our track like so. So everything seems to be working as intended. So now the next part is of course adding in more detail to our track. But the first thing I like to do when I load onto a track is I like to go into the app shelf over here, go into the AI section. So I bring out this widget and I click start recording. Then all you have to do is you drive one lap along the racing line of your track and you will get an AI file that you can then use to add other cars and race against them. What you actually need to do is you need to drive a full lap. So our lap begins around here. My recording will start when I cross this line and then you need to complete a full lap without going off track and cross this line again, and that will create the racing line for you. I'll be driving this on arrow keys on keyboard and mouse, so this will probably not be the greatest AI line, but it should be good for what we're doing over in this video. And as you complete the lap, you'll see that the racing line will appear. So if we go ahead and look at the line right now, you can see the exact line that I took. Then all you have to do is you simply close the game. So you go hit exit. And in the track folder that you created before, so in the tutorial folder, you'll see that a new folder pops up called AI, and inside will be an AI candidate file. What you then do is you simply rename this and you remove the .candidate part. So it's just called fast_lane.ai. It will ask you if you want to change it, click yes, and you're good to go. So now I want to show you guys how to actually add more pit boxes, and we'll also add a few other objects on our track, just so I show you how you can export selected objects only and then combine them onto your track as well. So first, let's go ahead and add a few pit boxes. I'll take my start and pit position over here, and I'll simply just duplicate it back a few times like so, just so we have a few more cars. The naming over here will be incorrect, so I'll go into the scan for issues section and fix the numbers like so. Let's also just add a huge Suzanne over here on this turn. We'll simply position here like so, and we'll throw on a random material just so she looks like some rock. Now all we have to do is go into the material editor, auto set up everything again, and now we will export the Suzanne and the few extra pit stops that we did over here. So I know AC pit 0 and start 0 are already in the previous file, so I'll just take all the other ones. And then let's also not forget our Suzanne, so we have all of these things selected now. I'll go export selected only and export it as a separate file. We'll call this pits plus Suzanne. Then all we have to do is we go into the layout section. We need to initialize the layout and then scan for all of our KN5 models, where we'll say that we want to combine the tutorial KN5, so that's the main track over here, and our pits and Suzanne. Simply click build layouts, and that is it. Then all you have to do is you load up Content Manager, switch it to race, set the amount of your opponents, and hit go. We'll be missing a tag called circuit. You can just click yes and fix it, and Content Manager will edit the file for you. And just like that, you'll see that we load in, we have our Suzanne in the distance, and we have our multiple go-karts. If you press Ctrl C, you will enable the AI driver for your vehicle. So we can now see that these carts will at least attempt to race. While they're racing, I can show you a couple of cool features of the add-on. So with the game open, I can bring Blender back into view like so, and I'll actually be able to replace textures and still make edits on our track. So I'll position Blender like so. I'll go into the material editor section over here, look for the screenshot material, and let's replace the grass texture. So that's the TX diffuse. I'll simply load this screenshot of grass. So this is not a very good example, but you can click replace texture, hit save to xconfig, and you will see that the changes will pop up in game, and also our grass effects will appear. So now this is starting to look a little bit more like a racetrack. Of course, the hue of the grass is a little bit off compared to our trees, but like I said, it's just a shitty screenshot. Then the next step is, of course, just adding in a few other features. So maybe swapping out a material, adding a water feature, adding in a building or two, and simply making the track come to life. So with that said, I hope you guys feel a little bit inspired to begin creating your very first Assetto Corsa track. It is a lot of fun to make these tracks, and it's also a lot of fun to then drive the tracks that you've created. And the limit is really just your imagination. So you can do a lot with this, and it's really fun to create for yourself and then enjoy what you've created. So hope you guys feel a little bit inspired. I hope this tutorial was useful. And if you want to see more things like this in the future, please let me know. I would love to make more tutorials. I'm also thinking about starting to live stream a few of the track creations, where I would go a lot more in depth into how to actually create tracks and what are sort of the good rules to follow to make them both aesthetic and also just better quality. So thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys enjoyed this video, and that's it for now. Bye bye.